Art-Centric Podcast with Rafi and Klee.
Hola, you amazing artist. It's Rafi.
And Klee.
And today we are going to talk about For the Love of Art.
For the love of art.
Yeah. So the you might be wondering, like, okay, well, what does that mean? What are you guys talking about? And really, we just want to talk about anything that comes to mind when it comes to art and why it is that we create why it is that we do what we do as artists.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of you guys out there listening to this probably know that it's not the easiest thing in the world when it comes to finances or turning it into a business or anything like that. And so why do we do it? Why is it that we do this thing that sometimes drives us crazy?
Maybe the knee-jerk response is like, because we're insane.
I mean, there is some truth to that. There is some truth to that.
The good kind.
You got to think about it. Yeah, we're insane in a good way. I think about that. So I'm working on this piece that I've been working on for a while over the last year. You guys know that last year was unfortunately last year I did not get to focus on the studio as much as I would have wanted to. And by not focusing on the studio means I got in there only a handful of days last year, which is not what you do when you are an artist and this is what you do full time.
Not ideally, no.
No, not ideally. And there is this one piece, it's a large canvas that I stretched myself, and I have been struggling with this thing. Right now, I am on what would be considered the third rendition of this piece. The first rendition of it was an image of a woman with light coming out of her, and then the second rendition was a man punching the ground with lightning coming out of the ground, and now I've got this third rendition that I'm much more happy with. It's just not there yet, but it's electrifying. It's getting to that point. So I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, why is it that we sit there and push through and create stuff, right? And for ourselves, essentially, right? Like, you're using this canvas, you are buying materials, you are putting it on canvas. There is zero guarantee that the artwork is going to sell, right? So as far as a business standpoint, that doesn't make any sense, right? So you're pouring 2 years worth of time and energy into something that is not going to sell. And it's definitely not going to sell for a price that covers 2 years worth of, living expenses. So business wise, it doesn't make sense. And I was really thinking about that. I was like, why is it that I create art? Because obviously, yes, I am an artist for a living, but I definitely don't create art for the money, because the money is never guaranteed in that. So why do I create art? And of course, the quick answer is because I love it,
Right.
And so I want to investigate that a little bit further. I want to investigate what is the true reason that I create art?
I think I've been thinking a lot about this lately because, when you are doing art as a career, it's sometimes it's easy to lose your way and forget why you do art. And so I think it's a pretty good idea to periodically revisit this and actively remember why you love this thing. And I think there's probably a lot of different pieces of that puzzle that come together to form the larger image of why you personally love what you do. For me, one of the reasons is that I love magic and the magical side of life, and doing art reminds me of the magic of life.
Yeah.
So that's one little piece of the puzzle.
And for everybody listening to this at home, we have our amazing Rogue Artist family here with us, and they're going to chime in with their comments, questions, insights, because their insights are absolutely brilliant. So if you hear us reading something, that's who we're reading comments from. And the first one we have is from On Hand Art, who says, even though I get nervous about screwing up a piece while working on it, everyone, all of us do that, I'm driven to make art. I love that. And I I want to explore that a little bit further, right? Because I think the reason that I was thinking about this was because obviously there's the love of creating art, right? But to me, that's on the surface, or like I'm driven to create art, right? For a lot of us, like last year was rough for me because I didn't get into studio enough to create art, and you feel like there's this emptiness, like something is missing in your life, and that's something that I experienced a lot when I was in the corporate world, where I wasn't getting into any kind of studio. I always had some kind of like art spot where I could create stuff, but a lot of times the demands of life and work, like I just didn't, my own attitude, I didn't get to create as much as I wanted to. And what is that reason? Like, why is it that some of us are so driven to create? I really, really want to explore that a little bit more.
Debbie said, because I would become depressed if I don't. So that's touching on what you were just expressing.
Yep.
And I think we want to even unpeel that a little further and be like, what? So what is it? What does that mean for the artist? Like, why is there this feeling of lack when you're not doing it? And this feeling, even when it makes you nervous, this feeling of like, the rush and the release of doing this thing.
Yeah.
On Hand said, I get your question now. Art brings me joy and lets me put things into the world that I want to see. It lets me make the world just a little more surreal.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
That's cool.
That is good.
That's kind of parallel to like me looking for the magic and creating the magic, I feel like. Ginny said, all these years since I was young, I would not be able to sleep and just lay awake all night thinking how to do it, just to put it in the corner after I finished and start another.
I love that. I love that. There is this motivation to create. And that's why I like getting to the bottom of that, because it really purifies the motivation behind it, right? Because when you're turning this into a career, I would say that one of the pitfalls of turning your art, the thing that you love, into a career is that when money gets involved, all of a sudden motivations can shift, right? Because we are very used to doing a lot of things in life that we don't want to do in order to make money. Having a job, for example, just to pay the bills. And for some reason, I know that for myself, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but for myself, it's easy to forget why it is that you create art in the first place when money gets involved, because all of a sudden it's like, well, I need to create enough for this show and I want to make enough pieces because I need to pay bills this month and all that stuff. And your motivation gets a little bit tarnished, I like to say. Mm-hmm. So I love these discussions where we get to the bottom of it and, saying that for me, for example, I would say that my motivation behind it is similar. It's like, I want to add more color. I want to be able to express myself in the way that I can only express myself with my art or with my writing or with my music or anything like that. I want to express myself. Underneath that is another layer of, I don't want to be invisible anymore.
Yeah, so I can look at your art and your process and observe in you that with your artwork, it's almost like you're giving yourself the gift that maybe you felt like you were denied in your earlier years, which is this feeling of power and empowerment, because your work is supercharged with this empowered feeling and these empowering visuals. And so I think one aspect of art is that we're sometimes giving ourselves a gift of something that maybe we felt a lack of or felt denied in our life. And so we're I think Lisa had said, therapeutic, it enriches my soul, calms and centers me, and creating helps me process the biggest of life's questions.
Oh, I love that, Lisa. That's great.
So I think it helps us to know ourselves better and to maybe fill in things that we might feel like we were missing.
I would say that that's a really good analysis, because like when I was younger, I think one of the reasons that I really got into art, right, if I trace it back to my childhood, I was an only kid, and I spent a lot of time alone. Like my parents were off doing their own thing, and I spent a lot of time alone. And I was very socially awkward. Like I did not know how to interact with
Yeah.
other kids or anything like that. So like school was, by the time I got to school was a nightmare, right? Because I just didn't know how to interact or express myself the way that other kids express themselves when they're used to interacting with other people. And because I didn't have that connection, so my way of expressing myself was through my art for myself. Like a lot of times I process my feelings by creating pictures and images and things like that, or writing short stories and stuff. So I was very much in my own world, and I used art in order to express myself, not to other people, but for myself, right? It becomes more like putting it out there is more of like, it's easy to get because I just said, like, I don't want to be invisible anymore. Now, there's a pitfall there as well, right? Because in the beginning, it was like, I'm going to speak my voice because I don't want to be invisible anymore. And then all of you have experienced this on social media where you post things and you are invisible.
You're
Nobody
like,
sees you.
Drats.
Yeah. So like I had to rewrite, I had to really investigate further and realize that like it had nothing to do with the response. It had to do with the empowerment that I felt of actually taking these things that I created and putting them out there for the world to see, whether the world looked at it, paid attention or not. At least I was speaking. I have a voice, damn it. I am going to say and express what it is that I feel in any way, shape, opportunity that I can. And my art is the biggest thing because my art was the thing that was there in the very beginning. So there's my deep why. Why do I create? Why do I have this need to create?
So you could say that the act of sharing the art is sharing a perspective to connect, but the act of doing the art is almost like getting to show yourself what the perspective is in the first place.
Right.
And for artists, you might as well ask, well, why do you have a laugh or a cry or use the bathroom? It's not even a question of if it's going to happen.
Right.
It's a question of when it's like part of, it is how we've developed our way of being. It is, I think very much it is how, especially when you're a kid who was isolated and in your imagination a lot and maybe processing things, difficult things for some of us.
Yeah.
It is your way of communicating with yourself. Sometimes things that you can't find words for. I think music for me early on was a way to explore things that I couldn't find words for. And then over time it develops into even more than that. But it's a direct line of communication with yourself.
Yeah,
I
most
think.
definitely.
Heidi said, I've got so much in me to come out that if I don't create the work, I feel like my head might explode.
That's good, Heidi. Yeah, yeah. I feel that way too. Like I said, last year was challenging. Because my priorities had shifted to more online, like working at a website. Well, a lot of you guys know there were technical glitches and things like that. And I found myself prioritizing that instead of just ending it and not getting in the studio enough. And honestly, there was a lot of times where I just didn't even know how to feel about stuff because
Yeah.
I wasn't processing stuff. I wasn't getting my ideas out. I wasn't excited. I wasn't working on things that I was excited about. I wasn't toiling away in the studio working on something that I couldn't figure out. Like all of that stuff was put to the side. And I can tell you right now, that's definitely not a mistake that I'm going to make again because
Indeed.
I think I had forgotten what it felt like to not be creating.
So it like became so normal that you started to like not even acknowledge how necessary it is for you.
I think so.
And then the lack thereof reminded you of how important.
I think so, because I was getting into the studio every day. I mean, I get into the studio every day. It's important to, it was important to me to create every day because we were doing shows and we were doing all this other stuff. And I think I had forgotten how much I process the world through the art that I create. My art is a mirror into myself, into my own emotions. And it's it's interesting how much of an impact it has on you when you don't. Like, you know, I started out, I feel just from being in the studio, you know, the year just started, but just from being in the studio more consistently now, I feel more on my own 2 feet, standing stronger in my beliefs and my thoughts and things like that.
Because you're communicating with yourself again.
Exactly.
It's like you're communicating with yourself through art. When you're not, then you're really more focused on the external, which is fine. But then the internal is getting...
There's an overload of information in the external, though. There is so much information coming at you that, like, I think that time to process, even if you're not directly thinking about it, that time to process your thoughts in the subconscious when you're creating, where, like, you're kind of like what Jay says here, the world fades away while I'm arting, and I feel like it's one of the only times I'm listening to myself. And that... Boom, Jay. That's perfect. That's how I feel.
Aurora said, sometimes I just need to get what I see in my head out. What good is that inner imaginary universe if you never share it with anyone? Yeah, the desire to share, or just to, I've had moments where I've had a dream or a daydream or whatever, and it's like really just the act of getting it, making it tangible because I found it so visually stimulating or audibly stimulating or whatever that let's talk about that, actually. There's something about taking the raw material that is a thought or an idea or a subconscious thing and making it tangible. That is like, I think that all humans are driven to do this, to create. I think we all are driven to create. Even people that I've known that say that they're not creative, they're still creators because
there's something that they're doing.
And the one, you know, I've seen people who say they're not creative get a lot out of having a creative block of time or being creative in other ways, whether that's through the language of cooking or math, whatever it is. Gardening. We are creators. And so I think that there's an innate drive in us to take the intangible, and I say that in quotations because thoughts are still very tangible and feelings are tangible, but to take the stuff that exists in that place and to translate it and create something that is tangible that we then get to look at or hear or smell or whatever, and then other people can experience it too. And I've had people tell me that that's a God complex. But whatever, if it is, because I think that all people are driven in some way, shape, or form to make the intangible tangible, to work with the raw materials of thought and feeling and make it into something, and also to work with the raw materials that are paint or metal or wood or ceramics and make those into something.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, you have this idea or this thing floating around inside of you, and then you bring it to life. Like it becomes a tangible thing. And so, like, it's almost you're birthing this thing into the world. Yeah. Something that never existed quite in the way that it exists. Even if you're doing something, like, let's say you're doing a landscape that other artists have done, you're still bringing into the world something that is vastly unique to anything else that's out there.
100%. Never the same in all of the universe. And I think part of what we love about it is that it is challenging and we don't know how it's going to go and we don't know what it's going to be when it comes to fruition. We don't know if it's going to work out. Somebody that we knew called it the hunt.
The hunt, yeah.
And so that's part of the rush too in the creation process.
Carrie said, I need to. If I don't make stuff, I feel crappy. I have things in my brain that need to exist in the tangible world.
So there it is.
Yep.
And that is powerful. It's magic. It is bridging the gap also between like your physical self and your subconscious self, your spiritual self, whatever you want to call it. Usually I feel like it's a coalescing of like all the parts of you and then creating.
Yep.
Barbara said, for me right now, art helps me have a visual representation of what's going on internally. Totally, like bridging that gap. Not only making sense of the chaos in my mind, but also identifying frequencies.
Beautifully put.
Totally.
Beautifully put. I love that.
Debbie said, only reason I sell my art is because I need to make room for more art.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
totally feel you on that.
That's the thing, Debbie. Like, I don't, like, I am like, because I will say, don't focus on the money, but I understand it's great to make money because then you can create more stuff and you make room for creating more stuff. But it's so important to get to the core of why it is that you create. What is that love that you're feeling for the art, so that you don't allow money to get in the way of the creative part, right? Because none of us started creating art because we're like, we're going to make all that money. Like
No.
that's not what was at the core of creating the art. And I think it's important to hold on to that because that's where your power is.
Mm-hmm. Barbara said, anxiety and overwhelm is energy asking for expression and release. Art helps me do this.
Yeah, beautifully
That's
put.
beautifully put. And that was kind of what I was trying to reach for when I said, why do you cry? Why do you laugh? It's the same kind of reason that you make art as well. Jenny said, so many thoughts, have to get them out to make room for the others. There's no way to accurately express it in everyday words to people who aren't in your brain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tyler said, art became therapy for me during the pandemic. I did have visions of making a lot of money as a breakout artist, but in quarantine, art became therapy. Now it's a passion, and I'd be sad without it.
Exactly. And there was a lot of, during for the pandemic and the whole idea of breaking out as an artist, there's a lot of myths out there that revolve around that are financially driven. And that's Tyler, those are the pitfalls that I felt into in the very beginning of doing what I was doing. And it made everything much more discouraging. And I think that's why one of my superpowers throughout the doing this as an art career is that constant reminder of why is it that I do this? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the reason that I do this? Why do I love doing this? Right? Would I do this if I wasn't making any money with it? And it's important to hold on to that passion because that's what drives you to create, not making money.
Yeah, definitely. Lisa said, I get very grumpy if I'm too long out of the studio.
So true,
it's like
Lisa.
breathing,
Yeah.
right? Esther said, art made me want to live when I didn't see the point anymore.
So good, Esther. I have experienced that in my own way. Mm-hmm. It was basically my entire life in corporate was kind of that. Where it was like, I don't see the point to this. Like, what is life about? Like, this just doesn't feel fulfilling. And in creating art, that's where getting that out and expressing myself, it really made the world different for me. Really made the world different for me.
Relighting the pilot light when the pilot light has gone.
Yeah.
Eric said, sort of in relation to the new podcast time, how do you motivate yourself to get into the studio if you only have an hour or two to dedicate rather than being able to have a full session?
An hour or two, so much could be taken care of in an hour or two, right? So like if I get into the studio and I know that like I have got this much time between, right? Then I know that maybe I'm going to get in there and I'm going to be in a design phase. Maybe I'm going to sketch out some future paintings on canvas, or I already have several works going on. So it's not going to hurt if I go in there and add some colors to something or do something. I usually have several projects going on. And even when I do a full session, like chances are I'm not going to get that work done during that session. So with art, I've gotten really, really good at that. Just taking advantage of any amount of time that I can get in the studio.
I've learned how to do that too, because I used to feel like there was no point if I had a time limit, and it's really changed for me. In fact, nowadays, my sessions at the bench generally are an hour or two, same with the music desk. And basically, I'm aware of the time limit, but once I get at the bench or at the music desk, I set an alarm if I have to let me know time's up. But otherwise, I ignore the time limit. I stop thinking about it and I let myself just be working on whatever it is without kind of paying attention to the time limit.
Yeah.
Especially if the time limit feels stifling. And what I found often is that I feel after an hour or two, I feel very fulfilled and content with where I got with it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Sometimes that's not the case and I don't want to step away and I feel like, ugh, but then that makes me also excited to go back to it the next day or whenever. So it kind of keeps the motivation alive at the same time.
Yeah.
Naomi said, "Hi guys, I'm intimidated by talking about my art due to it being deeper than a 5-minute convo allows. When one asks me to explain, I clam up and think, are you a licensed therapist and how much time can you spare?" Yeah, and that's totally valid. Sometimes we don't know how to like even approach that or go there with people. And I think what Rafi and I have found is there's layers of stuff that you can divulge or share about your art.
It starts with the Cliff Notes summary.
The general.
Right? And that's where I start the conversation. And then if it becomes a conversation that goes a little bit deeper, especially if the person relates to the painting in some way, shape, or form, because I'll give maybe the Cliff Notes version of it, and then I'll ask them, well, what do you see in the piece? Right? Mm-hmm. And that gets that conversation started. Mm-hmm. I don't worry about explaining every detail. Mm-hmm. I just have a conversation with them, right? Because that's what it does, the artwork, like I was saying. Like the artwork is me expressing the world to myself. And so I'm not going to, in my mind, like my pieces, there are so many layers to my pieces that like I'm not going to overwhelm someone when they ask right off the bat, because you don't know, is that a question because something about the work connected with them? Or is it a question because that's typically what they ask artists? You know, is it just a surface question? Yeah. So I usually for each one, I'll be like, well, you know, this one represents, and I try to come up with one word or a sentence that says this one represents this. And then I'll ask them, like, what do you feel, you know, what is it that you're getting from this piece? And then I allow the conversation to just kind of go organically from there.
Yeah, it is a case by case. Someone said to me recently that the latest music drop, All We Are, had a very spiritual tone to it. And my response was, yeah, it definitely does have a spiritual element. I could have said, I am totally driven by the places where science and spirituality intersect. I'm obsessed with it. But in that moment, it was just simpler to be like, yeah, there's a spiritual component. Or to just simply say like, man, guys, I really like rocks, you know, and you don't really have to give any more in that moment. Or like, supernovas are so cool. Did you know that precious metals come from them?
Yeah, and that right there starts a conversation with somebody who's interested in that particular thing that you're talking about.
And they don't need to know that, like, maybe at some point they know that I was a lonely kid that went through stuff and that these particular things became an outlet of expression for me, but I'm not going to come out the gate with that with people.
No.
And you don't owe people that if you're not comfortable talking about it.
No, you guys, being authentic is not about spilling the beans about everything about yourself in the first conversation. Being authentic is talking about what you feel comfortable talking about.
And so on the flip side of that, the more you do get comfortable talking about that, and if you do feel comfortable and ready to talk about some of the deeper things that are in the art, that is also totally good and groovy, but it is absolutely about your comfort level.
Yeah, because your art is already expressing it. So you don't have to like explain it. You know what I mean? And that's where a lot of that pressure comes from. Like you are expressing yourself. You are creating this thing because you are driven to create it. Other than that, like you don't have to, you could talk about the art in a Cliff's Notes version, but all of the feelings are there. So really it's like asking, it's kind of like qualifying the person when you ask them like, what is it that you're feeling? You know?
Some of you have expressed to us, and also the kids during this time, that I'm doing shadow work right now. And that's what this art is about. And I think that that's a beautiful way to say, I'm exploring parts of myself that might be a little difficult. And there's some of that in this art.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, dude, I feel that so much. I think that's a journey that we're all on in some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, and I think maybe sitting and finding ways to say those things in ways that you're comfortable with is a really good thing to do, to practice.
Yeah, and the more shows, the reason that we're comfortable with it is because we've done a lot of shows. So every show, there's always an opportunity. You're always kind of like hit from left field with a question, and you just become more comfortable doing it. Even I clammed up a lot.
Oh man,
I still clam
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
don't see that as like a negative thing when you're expressing yourself in your art.
Diego said a similar feeling like Jay's where everything and everyone fades away while doing art, and that feeling can become addictive sometimes.
It really does.
And Debbie said it's a form of meditation, especially when I'm in the flow.
Yeah.
Totally. Anhan said, man, everyone is putting into words all the things I'm feeling too. It's so great to hear. I'm not the only one.
Right. And that's the thing. Like as creatives, I love these kind of conversations where you're talking about like what is it underneath it? What is it that really drives you to create?
I think this is another piece of the puzzle for me too. As an isolated creative kid, one of the side effects, and I'll call it a side effect because it wasn't the motivating factor, but one of the side effects that I love about being a creative person is getting to have friendships with other creative people. The community that forms around creative people, and when creative people find each other, and then the conversations that we get to have, I love that. So that was an unexpected sort of like boon.
It really was.
The creative community, at least our creative community.
I was not expecting to have it, and not only the creative community, but like people that like came into the booth, and some of the conversations that we had were out of this world, like amazing conversations. And as a like a terrified introvert, I did not expect to feel as confident as I do in doing what I do, other than the fact that like in expressing my art and putting it out there, it really opened up that world for me.
This is such a cool thing because art is, when you share art, it's a conversation and it's a story. Whether it's a little tiny story or a big, huge story, it's a story. And it's like once you create the art, then you get to sit with the art and be like, what's the story that I'm telling here? What's the conversation? And then once you start sifting through that, it actually helps you over time to have that conversation in words with another human if you want to, if they see the art and they're resonating with that emotion.
Yeah.
It actually can help you find the words where there weren't words before, if that's something that you want to do.
And that's why I think it's important that like you create something. Like I am fascinated by the stuff that I create that I'm like, oh, I really love that, or like whatever. And then I sit there and try to like step outside of myself for a little bit, look at the art and be like, why did you create this? Like, what is it about this that you really like? What resonates with you, right? And honestly, in every single one of those communions with my art, I would say, I find out more about myself
Every time.
And it's just your art. No matter what it is that you create, your art will always mirror something within you. Always mirror something within you.
Barbara said, this conversation thread is amazing. Thank you, everyone. I second that emotion. Lady K. Hi, Lady K.
Hey, Lady K.
I tell people that when I'm making art, that what I'm making is beyond me. I feel like I'm more of a vessel for that thing to come out rather than I really made it, unless I planned a lot of stuff beforehand. There is that element, too. We've been talking with the kids about this, and we've been calling it a download. Like, you get a download, and it almost feels like you were just the channel through which it came, and the vessel that helped create it. And that's exciting to me when that happens. And I kind of feel like it's a collaboration because it's an energy that's like floating around waiting to be manifest. And you have to kind of line up with that. Like you have to be kind of like receptive to it and ready for it and kind of vibrating in the same frequency as it
That's why I can't get in the studio and create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, even when it feels like a download and like you were just the hands, it is a collaboration. At least that's how I feel about it. I felt like a lot of songs that I've written were downloads, but I also felt like, dude, I was just the person to write that song too. And so that to me is really cool. And that also helps make that connection for me to all the things, myself and my spiritual self, sides of myself, things I'm trying to express, like the whole enchilada. It all brings it together.
Esther said, art teaches me about God, about myself, about others, about how I see the world. Beautifully put, Esther.
Lady K said, I still fall into those financial pitfalls, especially when I'm questioned by others if what I'm doing is profitable.
Yeah, you know what? Other people could keep that question to themselves. It is profitable, and it goes through ebbs and flows. And honestly, at the end of the day, your determination and your persistence is ultimately what matters. A lot of people love to think of things in those terms, like, is it profitable? Is it whatever? And it's like, A, that's none of your business. And B, it is what I make it. Plain and simple.
I have to laugh a little bit. For you Star Trek nerds out there, that word, of course, always brings to mind the Ferengi in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not Ferengi. Sorry, like, I'm not worried about the profits. I'm doing this for other reasons.
Yeah,
There's
there's much deeper reasons. There are much more world impacting reasons than whether or not it's making a profit.
Carrie said, I'm exploring the places where the art and magic mix. Art's a powerful tool for magic, and magic is very much an art. It's alchemy. That is awesomely stated.
Put. I love that.
And I totally feel that.
Yeah.
Nancy said, art helped me through my cancer diagnosis and treatment, and it was the most powerful salve to my soul.
Beautifully put, Nancy. Yeah, yeah. And you know what? There's scientific tests that they have done and measured about the healing properties of creating art. It is, if you guys ever get the chance to look at some of that research, it is mind-blowing how healing it is to work on. I know you guys know that already.
Yeah. Lady K said, I loved Clee's quote about talking about creating magical objects in one of the other podcasts. I like that idea much better than I'm making a product.
Yeah, it's not a product. It's not a product. If you were making bottles of shampoo and mass producing them, then it would be a product, but it's not.
Unless you were doing magical shampoo, which could be a thing.
Well, yeah.
That was part of my journey, and I want to touch on a couple of things here of burning out because I forgot why I do what I do, and then allowing myself burnout time to do nothing. And actually what I was doing during that time, because I love art so much, is I was consuming vast quantities of other people's art and stories in the form of music and movies and programs. And all of a sudden I was bam, 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 back to remembering, oh yeah, I believe in magic. I practice magic. I create magical objects. And it was like the lights came back on and all of a sudden I was like supercharged and flooded with inspiration once again. And also on that note, going back to how much do you say, right? I'm not going to drop that on somebody like straight out the gate, like that I burned out and that I make, like I forgot that and this is what I do.
Yeah.
Going back to how much do you divulge and how do you get comfortable with that, it's enough for me to say, actually, I had to work on saying I make magical objects because that can be a tricky thing to say when you don't know how it'll be received. And so getting comfortable with saying that again, but also just, you know, like I like to walk in the magic of life. I'm interested in where science and art and spirituality intersect. We're talking about, we're not talking about the humdrum stuff here. We're talking about the sparkly stuff of life. But it's just a piece of that. And then if somebody really wants to get into that, right? Like I resonate with that, then okay, let's talk about walking in magic.
Man,
And
some really great conversations come from those.
yeah, and we do this with you guys, and actually part of the reason that I think I'm comfortable is because I can do this with you guys. And maybe for some of you, talking about these things with the community could help you or does help you get comfortable talking with people at shows or other people outside of this community. Little piece at a time, one piece at a time.
One piece at a time.
So that was kind of a tangent, but I wanted to kind of touch on those things. Definitely.
Jenny said, there was a time I didn't do any art. I'm not sure why. Without realizing it, I did everything with a crazy art scientist flair. How many cookies did I invent? How much drive-by razzle-dazzle did I do? I love it. I love it. Yeah.
And that
it takes over. It takes over. But you have to have that creative outlet for it to take over. I love that.
Aurora said, nothing makes my brain go totally blank than someone asking me, so what's your novel about? My stuff is so multi-layered that I find it impossible to explain in a simple nutshell. And so maybe that's where this one piece at a time thing can be beneficial to, I think, to all of us, right? You don't owe anyone the full scoop or the full divulging of your story, especially if they didn't sign up for it. Or you can't gauge where they are. So you could be like, you could find a one-word summary.
Yeah, one character. So it's a story arc of like one character that finds growth, or is dealing with this or is dealing with that. And basically just, I get it because like everything is multi-layered when we create it, even if we don't realize that it's multi-layered, right? Whether you're writing a book, whether you're writing a song, whether you are creating some artwork, whether you're creating a piece of jewelry, whatever it is, it's going to have a lot of facets to it. And you're going to get bogged down if you try to explain that, like somebody like asks you a question and then you just word vomit all of it out. And like, a lot of us think that that's what it means to talk about your art or your creations. And it's like, no, it's not. You have to qualify the conversation to begin with, right? Just because they're asking like, what is your book about? Or what is this piece about? Like, you don't have to like give them the entire backstory. And that's where it's like, just simplify it to the simplest thing that you possibly can. Because if they are interested, then they will ask another question, right? And that's where I think that's where the whole money thing comes in, and it just mucks up the waters. Because if somebody asks about something, then immediately you're like, oh my God, does that mean that they want to buy it? And then you just want to word vomit everything, but then you get nervous and then you clam up and you don't know what to do. And it's because you're giving yourself way too much pressure. It's just a conversation. It's just a conversation. You're getting to know someone. That's all it is.
Ginny said, speaking of supernovas, that Moon-Jupiter combo last night was stunning. We didn't see it.
We did not see it.
It was overcast and snowing here.
Yeah.
And we hunkered down under blankets. But Ginny, that makes me really happy to know that you experienced it.
Debbie said, we creatives are from another planet.
Maybe. Aurora said, the characters I write about are very much complete people in my head, as complex as any real person you'd meet. I'm still convinced that I'm just observing an alternate reality when writing.
Pretty much how it goes.
You could even be like, dude, my characters are like hard to summarize, but if I had to, like, here's
one character. Yeah.
In fact, that's a really great summary.
Yeah. That really is.
Itself.
That really is.
Girlfriend said, for me, my art and fashion brand is creating for the world where magic lives. Life can be hard and messy, and I just like being able to keep one foot in a magic place.
Oh, I love it, Gail.
That is a really cool way to say that feeling.
Yeah.
I resonate with that so much.
Yeah.
Esther said, gotta sign off. Go Rogues. Thanks for being here, Esther. Lady K said, downloads is such an interesting way to think about it. It also helps me stay motivated to learn new techniques. So when a new download comes in, I have the skills ready to execute the file type.
I love it.
Totally.
I love it.
Totally. It helps me too. I feel that way too. I'm like, I want to stay sharp so that when I get a download, I'm here for it. I want to be here for it.
Yep.
Lisa said, hey, nerds, even Spock was a musician.
Exactly.
Creativity is logical.
Yep.
So was Data.
Yep.
Data was all about musical performance and humanizing musical performance, and Data was super good about promoting his shows.
If you ever wonder what is the best way to promote any show that you're doing, whether it's music or art or anything, just watch some Next Gen and watch every time Data was going to perform. He basically went up to everyone and was like, are you coming to my concert tonight? Are you coming to my concert tonight? Are you coming to my concert? And there you go. That's marketing 101. You've got it down. You could do that. You will market yourself just fine.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Chris said, rules of acquisition number 104, do nothing unless it generates profit, unless it involves Umax. I love it. Truth be told, I love the Ferengi because they help put things in perspective.
In perspective, yes. Really
in
good
a really
perspective.
fun way.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the art that is science fiction too.
Science fiction and fantasy are amazing.
They really help us put things in perspective that it's like can be hard to conceptualize.
Yeah.
Art is wizardry. Absolutely, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Debbie said, I'm glad I finally made it here. This is an awesome conversation.
Well, glad to have you here, Debbie.
Unhand said, I always say stick to the results and benefits when you explain stuff. You know what? That is actually really cool. The results and benefits when you explain stuff. I never quite thought about it that way. But so like even something like my shield necklace that I wear a lot, when I get asked about it, I usually tell people it's kind of like a worry stone, but not. And that's as far as I go, which is a result and benefit. It's an anchoring tool, right? I don't tell them straight out the gate, like, I have tremendous social anxiety, so I literally can't go out of the house without this necklace on.
That would be amazing. I think you should start it off like that.
Maybe
like,
I'll just open with that.
Do exactly what you did here for the video where you like leaned in and were like, I have tremendous social anxiety.
If I wasn't wearing this, I wouldn't be here right now. It's an anchoring tool. Yeah. But no, I'll be like, it's kind of like a worry stone, but it's like it's my rendition of like having a worry stone and anchoring piece, right? Then if the conversation goes in that direction, I might say, I have huge social anxiety. This helps me.
Gail said, I love Next Generation. Probably the best show ever. We don't want to get Clee started. That's a conversation starter because Clee is in love with
all of Star Trek.
All of Star Trek.
But if I had to pick a series, it's probably Next Gen.
It was inspiring. It was inspiring for life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not make we could do a whole podcast on how I feel about Star Trek. A series of podcasts probably.
So we're getting to the end of the podcast. So like I want to like get some final thoughts here about the love of art, for the love of art and creating.
Oh, for the love of art.
Yeah.
And
for the love of art. Yeah. So I think that this conversation is like this is one of the best conversations that I've had in a while about this particular subject. And I think that these are the kind of conversations that really ultimately matter, right? There's a lot of conversations out there in the art world about what is real art, what isn't real art. How do you get into, the art market? How do you blah, blah, how do you make money with your art and all that stuff? And I think that all that stuff kind of dehumanizes the act of creating, right? It makes it more into like a corporate type of endeavor. And it's easy for us to fall into that because, we want to make money. We want to be able to support ourselves and make money. However, if you lose sight of what is at the core, right? What is the foundation? What is that thing that really, really causes you to where you can't help but create, where you strive to do something, where you feel empty if you're not creating? That to me is the most powerful thing that an artist has moving forward in doing anything that they want, whether they want to make this a career or not. That is the powerful motivator that allows you to persist through the suck.
Yes.
Everything that we talked about here is the thing that pushes you forward.
And my final thought is going to piggyback off of that, which is if you've lost touch with that powerful driving force, and you're not finding it, acknowledge that maybe you need a reset. Maybe you need to look at that. An effective tool for me when I lose my way is to consume other people's art, take in other people's art, whether you go somewhere to look at visual art, or you immerse yourself in music that you love, or you binge watch all your favorite movies. For me, that lit my fire again. And it always lights my fire in new ways because I'm always picking up new things, even from art that I have consumed before. And also remember that your art is probably doing that for someone else.
Yeah.
Because it's an Ouroboros of amazing. It's an Ouroboros of awesomeness and magic. So, maybe that's my favorite thing about art. I don't think I could pick a favorite, but it's up there, is that art helps refuel the creative soul when you consume other people's art, and then your art can do that for somebody else. And it's this never-ending, amazing thing.
And see, and that's a great way of putting it, because if your mind is stuck in that place where you're thinking about things in financial ways, then instead of growing and consuming that art and being inspired by it, then you're comparing it.
Right.
You know, so it really shows you, like, where is your mindset at? Are you in an empowered place where you are going to persist and move forward? Or are you in a place where you are now allowing yourself to demotivate you from doing this thing that you can't help but do and put out there? You know, like, that's at its simplicity, this is the most powerful thing that we could all talk about.
Yeah.
Jenny said, sometimes, a lot, I have no memory of how I did something. I'll stare at it and think, how did I do this? I know I did it, though. I know I'm forgetful, but that's ridiculous. Jenny, that's why I have a notebook where I write down, sometimes, depending on a piece, I will write down step by step, put little paint splotches on there. Like, this is what I did. This is what I did with this color. This is what I did. I don't do it with everything, but there are certain pieces where I try to remember exactly how I did it, especially if it's like one of my series that are like made toward, they're all different, but like there are similar things in them. That's the only way. But one of the biggest struggles that I have going on now, I have done portraits. I have done tons of portraits. Beautiful picture, skin tones, everything. Boom. I have done them. I know how to do them. And every time I do them, I forget how to do them.
Yeah, man.
Like, completely. Like, just completely, like, I don't even know what to do with these colors.
I think that when you're in the zone and you're in the flow, that is the magic. And part of the consequence of that is that you don't remember, because you were in the zone.
Yeah.
And in the flow. And so we make ourselves field guides after the fact. I'll go back and try to retrace my steps as best I can if I think I want to try to make something similar in the future. Sometimes there was just a thing and it was a one-off and I just know that it'll never happen again. And I'm like, it's cool that happened though. And it was magic.
I think that when you allow yourself to get into flow, right? Because like it'll be my problem is that I'm like, oh, I don't remember how to do this, and immediately I'm planting a seed of doubt into it. Mm-hmm. But like when you're in the flow and you are just creating, and you're like, well, this feels right, and you just kind of go in that direction. I feel like those are the things where like I can't remember how I did it, because I was just following the flow. I was just in that place of creating and just following that. So I know that if I allow myself to get back into flow, that's fine. I don't need to have the answers. They will come to me. And then for other things, I do have a field guide. I do have a field guide.
Sometimes the field guide is handy.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just go
Yeah.
venture forward. And I think that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this was a great podcast. Thank you to the Rogues for being here. You guys are absolutely freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And you make these conversations so much fun.
Yes.
So relevant. You bring in your own perspective. And that's so important in these because, you know, we're all different and everybody relates to things in their own personal way. And that's ultimately the ultimate truth of how to deal with things or how to go through things.
So thank you for sharing your perspectives and your questions, which were super good, and your humor and everything in between.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And for everybody listening to this at home, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We try to do one of these podcasts once a week. And hey, if you like this and you'd like to subscribe or follow us on whatever platform it is that you're listening to this on, go ahead and hit that subscribe or follow button so that you could stay tuned to what it is that we're doing. And other than that, I think it's time to say goodbye. You want to say goodbye, Clee?
Good day.
Adios.